So our topic for today is titled Interfaces. So we have briefly discussed interfaces before with chapter 3. So kasama siya sa conceptual model. So sa interfaces, we have just discussed metaphor interface and card interface, in which ang pinipertain niya is yung visuals. Now, what we're going to discuss are the different types of interfaces that we use across different types of devices, softwares, or applications. So for the overview or the learning objectives that the student must know, in here, we're going to discuss 20 common types of interfaces. We'll discuss the main design and research considerations for each of the different interfaces. And also, we're going to study which interface is best for a particular application or activity. So let's start with looking into what are the different types of common interfaces. Now, here are the 20 interfaces that we're going to cover. We're going to start, obviously, from the very basic, which is the command line interface. Next would be graphical. Third will be multimedia. Then the rest is yung iba ng mga bagong forms of interfaces like virtual reality, web, mobile, appliance, voice, pen, touch, and so on. Now, through the span of a decade, we were introduced to different kinds of interfaces that we are now enjoying. Like for example, parang kailan lang wala pang VR or hindi pa ganun ka-efficient yung virtual reality technology. Pero ngayon, ang dali na lang niyang ma-integrate sa mga iba't ibang types ng ating smartphones. You just have to have a VR box to use that. Okay. So, we're going to start first again with the command line. So, what are command line interfaces? Now, I'll just read these statements or sentences na nakabulet. So, commands such as abbreviations, for instance, IS, is typed in at the prompt to which the system responds. For example, by listing current files. Some are hardwired at keyboard while others can be assigned to keys. Efficient, precise, and fast. Large overhead to learning set of commands. Now, command line interfaces class is very common with our desktops and even our computers. Basically, if you are programming or conducting your program, kahit ano pang programming language yan, like Python, C++, Java, every time that you're going to use a compiler in which you execute a series of lines or codes, you're technically using a command line type of interface. Pero ang pinaka-common type of command line interface would be the command prompt and then the PowerShell. So, si command prompt and PowerShell, meron siya pagka Windows operating system yung ginagamit mo. Ma'am, how about the other forms of operating systems? Meron din po ba silang command line interface? Kagaya ni command prompt tsaka ni PowerShell? Meron po. Ngayon, aside from using compilers or softwares or applications na kailangan mong i-type yung instruction or code, and then i-validate siya ni computer, pag nag-match yung code or yung command dun sa dictionary nila or sa system nila, magre-return siya ng output or ng result or response to sa tinype mong instruction. Ngayon, class, ang command line interface is also useful for creating batch files. If you're not aware what is a batch file, yun yung na-encounter natin na .bat na parang notepad na may notepad na icon and then may gear sa loob. Sometimes when we encounter batch files or .bat, we think of it as a virus. Pero .bat, though we could create a virus out of .bat or sort of a worm or something like that, program na ganyan, ang .bat ay ginagamit din natin for processing automatic commands. And they are powered by command line interfaces. And the last thing about command line interfaces is that, for example, nasira yung touchpad mo or yung mouse mo, and you have no other way of accessing your computer or navigating around your computer. Would it still be possible to use it? even without your mouse or your touchpad. Yes, that is still possible po by entering different types of keyboard keys or what we also called as shortcut keys. So, using that, by entering shortcut keys verified by a computer, then you are basically or technically using a command line base of interfaces. Now, command line interfaces are integrated with other forms or types of interfaces. And hindi siya ma-abolish kasi napaka-importante pa rin ng command line interfaces. So, bakit nauna nating i-discuss ang command line interface? Kasi po si command line interface yung kauna-unahang way ng pag-access ng isang tao sa computer. Kasi late na nai-attach or na-imbento si mouse. So, basically, how people interact with the computer at the dawn of the rise of computer technology, they use or they type certain forms of keywords para ma-access lang nila. The only disadvantage with command line interface is that we have a large overhead or we have to memorize kailangan natin mag-memorize ng madaming keywords just to access a particular command or instruction. So, medyo yun yung nakaka-challenge kay command line interface. Now, we have other games or applications na gumagamit ng command line interface like yung laro na Second Life. So, si Second Life para siyang game simulation. Ang kagaya niya is parang Sims. So, si Second Life, para madaming maka-access, hindi lang yung mga tao na walang disability, they have tried to insert a command line based interface for the visually impaired such as text SL. And also other examples of nagbibigay ng mga commands para sa mga with disability is yung mga iba't ibang platforms na nagpo-provide sa atin ng mga subtitles. Ayan. So, research and design considerations. Form, name types, and structures are key research questions. Consistency is most important design principle. For example, always use the first letter of the command. Command interfaces are popular for web scripting. And I don't need to emphasize what is web scripting because you have already done or you have already have your subjects in which you do certain forms of web scripting. Okay. Next topic is a more advanced type of interface over CL or command line interfaces. And that is what you call a graphical user interface or also known as GUI. We often encounter this with your Java programming subject. Kasi meron tayong tinatawag class, di ba, sa Java na console application and windowed application. So, ngayon, dito naman, Graphical User Interface or GUI. So, Xerox Star first WIMP or introduced the WIMP which gave us rise to Graphical User Interface. So, bago tayo nagkaroon ng GUI, yung ating mga interfaces or visual na itsura ng ating desktops or devices ay parang boxy or pa-window. So, kaya siya tinawag na WIMP or WIMP, which stands for the W stands for Windows. The sections of the screen can be scrolled, stretched, overlap, open, close, move around the screen using the mouse. While the icons in I sa WIMP are pictograms that represent applications, objects, commands, and tools that were open when clicked on. So, alam niyo naman, class, kung ano yung mga icons. So, yung mga icons na to parang mga picture representation na kamuka or katulad ng mga base sa mga physical objects. Na halimbawa, pag may nakita ka na yung icon na to, halimbawa nakita mo na mukha siyang house. So, it pertains to home or the main page. So, binasi natin siya sa actual na object. If you saw a trash can or a trash can na icon, you already know what it does. Kasi, in real life, may isang real object na trash can. And ano ginagawa nyo sa trash can? Doon nyo tinatapon yung mga bagay na ayaw nyo na or hindi nyo na kailangan or yung mga basura. So, ganun din sa trash can or recycle bin na icon sa ating desktop. We use it for dumping unwanted digital files. So that's the reason of behind the use of icons. Next, we have the menus. So you already know what is a menu. Menu is not the list that you use to order in a restaurant. Menu in our computer are a line of commands usually attached at the upper part of your software or application. Halimbawa, example of that would be file, edit, ayan, view, about us. So those are example of menus or menus. These are the list of options that can be scrolled through and selected. The pointing device, so from the word itself, pointing device, it usually pertains to the mouse. How the mouse controlling the cursor at a point of entry to the windows, menus, and icons on the screen. Now, if we cannot use command line if we do not prefer the use of command line interface, we can access our WIMP or graphical user interface using our touchpad or a mouse or a pointing device. Okay, so this is the first generation of the first graphical user interface. If you look closely, class, in the illustration that you see here, napaka-boxy nung design, right? They are either naglalaro lang yung shape sa square and then sa rectangle. Compared dun sa mga itsura or bagong itsura ng ating graphical user interface na soft na yung edges ng icons. If you go to Facebook, if you go to Instagram, if you go to your own computer, you'll notice, or even to your smartphone, you'll notice that the icons are no longer hindi na sila boxy yung itsura. Well, you could still choose that option, pero most of the, parang ang trend ngayon when it comes to icons or interfaces is to lessen the boxy or ma-edge na itsura. Parang circular or soft yung edges or dulo nung icons and even ng mga tabs na kiniklik natin. So anyway, this is the first generation of graphical user interface na hindi ko masabi kung naabutan nyo or naaalala nyo pa. Ayan. And these are the sample naman ng mga menu-based type of devices. Like for example, our smartwatch. So if you've used a smartwatch or has a similar product like this, you'll see that they are mostly powered or meron silang icon. So makikita nyo naman, observe the icon closely, class. Hindi siya boxy yung interfaces niya ngayon. Kasi bago to eh. So yung icons niya ay soft yung edges. As much as possible, they try to soften the edges of the icons. Yun yung trend kasi ngayon. Now, this smartwatch is solely incorporates a menu or icon-based type of command. So, ito, under pa rin siya ng graphical user interface because it makes use of icons to represent a series or lines of commands. Ayan. So, the window design,